New York City, July of 1974. Hot town, summer in the city, when the pretty people split for the Hamptons or Martha's Vineyard, and the rest stay behind to sweat. That legendary New York swagger, forged in the early post-war years, had become a distant dream, a bitter joke. Sidewalks were piled high with garbage, a visible symptom of municipal labor disputes. Crime had soared to all-time historic levels. The city itself was in a financial crisis, lurching downhill towards bankruptcy. But this was Manhattan. There were still places where dreams were stubbornly hanging on. Chaos outside, perhaps, but on West 44th Street, inside the air-conditioned sanctuary of the record plant, the only thing in a state of chaos was the artist. From his perch behind the API mixing console, Sheliakis had seen it all. He was a veteran of the studio wars, a master of dials and faders, compressors, and tape echo. He wasn't there to judge. He was there to bottle the lightning and transfer it onto 2-inch tape. Shelley had manned the board for many of the greats. He'd seen rock royalty at their worst and at their best. Tonight was shaping up to be a little of both. Through the studio glass, Yakis could see the problem. The band, a crack unit of New York session killers, was churning out a flawless hypnotic groove, but in the center of it all, John Lennon was adrift, hoping the current would magically carry the song home. A great title, strong groove, killer hook. The pieces were all there, but it needed something to pull it all together. The idea had come to Lennon weeks earlier, bathed in the ghostly blue light of a hotel room television somewhere around 3 a.m, swimming in a haze of brandy and cocaine, pulled under by a profound sense of alienation, channel surfing through the static of his own life. A distant voice calling from the shore. It was Reverend Ike, the flamboyant television evangelist, preaching his gospel of spiritual materialism.
"Let me tell you,"
the Reverend bellowed,
"whatever gets you through the night, it's all right."
Heh, found poetry. John grabbed it like a drowning man grabbing a life ring. He began refracting the phrase through the prism of his own experience. The hook evolved, first to whatever gets you through your life, and then the destination, whatever gets you to the light. A flash of the old brilliance. Playful punning and witty wordplay wrapped in a melodic hook, the winning formula for so many of his Beatles songs. But back here on West 44th Street, the clever phrasing was just that. It hadn't yet become a song. Suddenly, the control room door opened, and the stale recycled air seemed to crackle and change. Elton John strolled in. Outwardly, Elton radiated the unshakable confidence of the biggest rock star on the planet. Now, inside, he was nervous. Walking in, I realized, this is John fucking Lennon. You'd better perform. They'd been friends for a little over a year now. They'd met early in '73 on the set of a promotional video John was shooting for Mind Games. Lennon was an early fan. Back in 1970, he told a music writer he thought Your Song was the best new thing that's come along since we came along. Elton was starstruck, but Lennon quickly put him at ease, teased him a little. You're on the bloody radio all the time, can't get away from ya. They bonded further over a shared love for The Goon Show, a slapstick absurdist comedy hour that was popular on BBC Radio all through the 50s. They had something else in common, something big. Elton saw it on the set that day. They both liked to work fast and hated wasting time. Get in, get it done, and get out. After some talk, Elton asked what he was working on. Lennon, a bit guarded, had Yakis play a few of the tracks he'd finished for the new album, Walls and Bridges. They were solid, but nothing jumped out of the speakers. Then Lennon mentioned another. It was a bit of fluff, he said, a throwaway he wasn't even sure about. Play that one, Elton insisted. The upbeat groove of whatever gets you through the night filled the room. Lennon was dismissive, but Elton could hear something Lennon couldn't. He turned to his friend. That's it, John. That's the single. Lennon was incredulous. That one? It's just a bit of fun. Mind if I have a go? Elton asked, already moving towards the studio door. The piano part came quickly. Elton just sat down and nailed it. Nailing the harmony vocal, however, was a real grind. While Sheliakis punched him in and out, Elton worked methodically, phrase by phrase, sometimes word by word, layering his voice against Lennon's. It took hours. When they were done, the track wasn't just fixed, it was bulletproof. Yakis and Lennon listened to the playback. What Lennon had considered a throwaway was now undeniably a hit. Lennon took a final sharp drag from his cigarette and crushed it out. A slow nod. Then he turned to Elton and flashed a wry smile. Elton's confidence was absolute. This isn't just a hit, he announced. It's a #1. Lennon scoffed at the prediction. He was done chasing hits. Elton leaned in. All right, then. Let's make a bet. If the song hits #1, you get on stage with me at Madison Square Garden. Lennon considered for a moment, then stuck out his hand. That handshake sealed a wager between two friends, each chasing a different kind of light. One, a man who had lived in the brightest spotlight ever and was now searching for the quiet daylight of a normal life. The other, a man who saw that same spotlight as a destination and was now using its power to help his hero. It posed the fundamental question of our story. How did two men, bonded by this song, end up on opposite sides of the universe? The answer begins with a coronation.
Whatever gets you through your life, it's alright, it's alright. Do it wrong or do it right, it's alright, don't need to watch to waste your time. Oh no.
This podcast is music history, education, and commentary. Some coarse language is used and adult topics are sometimes discussed. It may not be appropriate for young children. Welcome to Rock and Roll Archaeology from Pantheon Media with your host, Christian Swain. Digging into music, culture, and technology. Past, present, and future. And now, on with the show.
Hello, diggers and archaeologists of all stripes. Did you guys know that when I was a kid, I was fascinated with Egyptology? And from there, I began a journey of always looking to the past to inform my present and prepare me for the future. They say history doesn't repeat, but sometimes it rhymes. You know, I can assure you, dear listener, that is the solid truth. For example, is rock and roll on the rise once again? Is it climbing out of its crypt to lay waste upon the land of the conformers? I think so. As I look around the musical landscape, and yes, I do get a fair amount of insider scoop, but this thing called rock and roll appears to be a thing in the culture again, by the people we all hoped would be leading a new charge. Young folks. Hopefully they are listening to our stories of the original icons and heroes and building new from there. But if you know someone who needs the goods, please send them our way. Seriously, there are a lot of new amazing rock and roll acts out there, and I won't name names because then that would just cause arguments, but I might suggest we give these kids a break to become great. Some of it may not speak this exact same language, but dive in and maybe learn something new. If we want this art form to continue to thrive, we have got to mint new rock stars because all the old ones are dying right in front of our eyes. I seem to remember the cognoscenti suggesting the Beatles were lightweights before Dylan got them to smoke some ganja. And look where they went. All right. Okay. A bit of the biz. Website is rockandrollarchaeology.com. And please hit the support button at the top if you're feeling generous. Even $1 a month on Patreon helps the cause for content. We can do much more with that support. But a hoodie or t-shirt or mug also helps and, of course, promotes the show to friends in a real tactile manner. The world is not just digital now, is it? And while you're there, please check out, this is awesome, the new archives page, where you will find show notes and playlists to each and every main episode. We're considering adding the shorts, so let us know if that sounds interesting to you. But now we have, for the main episodes, everything at your fingertips, and especially for our educator listeners. We hear you. We got it done, so it's all there for you. Finally, a huge shout out to Rock's Back Pages. It's where we go to start our research for every single episode. Seriously, given the scope of the 1970s, we would be hard pressed to do this without the RBP. So go to rocksbackpages.com for more info. Okay. Now, before we do the setup, we want to cite our key sources for this episode. First and foremost, Captain Fantastic, Elton John's Stellar Trip Through the 70s by Tom Doyle. Tom enjoyed more access to one-on-one interviews with Elton than anyone else ever, hundreds of hours. We consider his book authoritative, and the best part of all, it's a really fun read, so highly recommend. We also want to warmly acknowledge the work of a superb rock journalist and friend of the show, Robert Hilburn. We retrieved Robert's LA Times article from our terrific research partners at rocksbackpages.com. See, told you. Okay, off to pay some bills, and we'll be right back with the setup. All right, we're back. So, that opening scene, the superstar and the ex-Beatle making a hit record and a high-stakes wager. On the surface, it's another piece of rock and roll lore. But you know us by now. For our purposes, it's more than that. It's the central piece of evidence in our excavation. That bet wasn't just a bet, it was a collision. One man was sprinting towards the brightest spotlight on Earth, and the other had already been there and was desperately trying to find the exit. To understand how they got there, we have to rewind the tape back to 1970, to the moment the biggest band in the world ceased to exist. In that power vacuum left by the Beatles, John Lennon saw an escape hatch. But where Lennon saw an exit, Elton John saw a door swing open. He was chasing a dream of American superstardom he wasn't even sure he was ready for. But that uncertainty would be burned away by that spotlight. This is mostly the story of two friends on two different paths, and one fundamental question: what gets you to the light? But since we're talking about one ex-Beatle, and in the early 70s that cultural earthquake was still reverberating, we will look in on the other three as they too chart their own courses. Friends, we're very excited to give you episode 29 of Rock and Roll Archaeology, Whatever Gets You to the Light. August 21st, 1970, the International Terminal at LAX. It was an artifact from another city, another world. A London double-decker bus, painted a defiant, impossible red, idling in the shimmering heat. Inside, 8 pale Englishmen tried to sink all the way into their seats. At the center of the small tribe, the talent, Elton John, and the words, Bernie Taupin. Backing them up, the rhythmic engine, drummer Nigel Olsson and bassist Dee Murray. To the record company, Uni Records, the bus was a stroke of marketing genius, a rolling billboard announcing the arrival of Britain's next big thing. To the men inside, it was a mobile humiliation chamber. But as the conspicuous red bus made its long, slow crawl east from the airport, Elton and Bernie started sneaking looks out the window. Mortification was replaced first by curiosity, then by wide-eyed wonder. Through the windows they saw it, the America of 1,000 movies, the America they had daydreamed about as kids. Elton, a shy mama's boy from the West London suburbs, and Bernie, a farm boy from the East Midlands, started drinking it all in. palm tree-lined boulevards that stretched for miles, burger joints and donut shops, and the cars. An endless, glittering river of chrome and steel. The bus turned onto Sunset Boulevard. The dream suddenly had an address. Elton's embarrassment curdled into a sharp, insistent nervousness. He started talking faster, cracking jokes. Finally, the bus sighed to a stop in front of the Continental Hyatt House, the Riot House. Arrival. They had crossed the Great Divide.
Across the great divide, just grab your hat and take that ride. Get yourself a bride and bring your children down to the riverside.
To understand the significance of Elton John's arrival in Los Angeles, one has to understand the mythology that powered his imagination. A myth of an old, weird America, full of dusty roads, honorable outlaws, and hard-won wisdom. The architects of that myth were the band. For Elton and Bernie, their first two albums weren't just music, they were scripture. A fantasy of America so powerful they built their own response, Tumbleweed Connection. An Englishman's dream of the American frontier, written before they'd ever set foot in the country. Elton had a dual mission that first night in L.A. As a fan, he wanted to see the Dillards. As a professional, he needed to scout the room. His destination? The musical temple on Santa Monica Boulevard, the Troubadour. The Dillards were everything their records promised, virtuoso players steeped in the high, lonesome traditions of bluegrass, but plugged in, electric. They were another version, a fresh take, of the musical myth the band had crafted, the real thing. Elton studied sightlines, took in the sound of the room, watched the crowd respond. He was field testing his own fantasy, measuring his English dream of America against this raw, undeniable authenticity, preparing for his own turn in the dock. And what he saw gave him confidence. The clock was ticking down to Tuesday, August 25th, the first of 6 nights. Outside Elton's hotel room, the LA hype machine cranked into gear. Uni Records was working the phones. Radio spots hammered the airwaves. The name Elton John echoed from car stereos all over the city. A buzz began to build among the rock cognoscenti, a mix of curiosity and coastal cynicism. For the rest of the tribe, the downtime was a tourist holiday, and they splashed in the pool at the Riot House, took a day trip to the desert, and lived the dream they'd seen in the movies. On Sunday, a moment of crisis. The confidence Elton felt after scouting the club evaporated. When the rest of the group took a trip to Palm Springs, he stayed behind, stuck in his room, stuck inside his own head. For months now, the LA hype machine had built a cage of expectations around him. With 48 hours to go, every radio spot, every mention in the press, was the sound of a lock clicking shut. He started pulling himself out of it. Monday, they visited Disneyland. Elton put on a pair of Mickey Mouse ears and half-seriously told Dee and Nigel he was going to wear them on stage. At Tuesday's afternoon sound check, the panic spiral ended. Elton John found the key, unlocked the cage, and walked out. The fear was still there, a low-grade hum beneath the floorboards, but it was no longer in charge. The job was. The Troubadour was packed. For Robert Hilburn, a critic from the Los Angeles Times, all the pre-show hype felt like a burden. His job was to separate signal from noise, and tonight, the noise was deafening. With an effort, he set it aside. Forget the PR push, just watch the show. The lights dimmed. Neil Diamond walked to the mic. "I'm like the rest of you," he said. "I'm here because of having listened to Elton John's album." Elton emerged. Hilburn found himself processing a series of contradictions. The pieces didn't fit the established rock and roll formula. The frontman had none of the preening swagger of a Jagger or a Presley, unassuming in simple denim overalls. A bit awkward, maybe. An enigma. And the lyricist, the other half of the creative team, was absent entirely. Elton sat at the piano, alone. Then, the first chords of your song filled the room. Hilburn glanced around. Just a few bars in, and Elton already owned this jaded crowd of celebrities and industry big shots, with a few civilians sprinkled in. Halfway through, bassist Dee Murray slipped in an elegant counter melody. Then came the second song, Bad Side of the Moon. Nigel Olsson's snare cracked on the downbeat. The three-piece band ignited, upshifting from quiet subtlety to a rock and roll force. As Hilburn would later marvel, they sounded like a full orchestra. Volume swelled, then precisely dropped away. Elton's raw voice and piano hung in the sudden quiet. The hushed crowd, including Hilburn, leaned in. The band crashed back in as one, ferocious but tightly under control. Veteran moves from three players, barely out of their teens. Hilburn's mental checklist was now being ticked off in real time. Artistry? Check. Commercial appeal? A hard check. Tonight, they had collided right before his eyes. The set climaxed with Burn Down the Mission, 18 minutes of passion and power. Elton kicked over the piano bench, dropped to his knees, and pounded the keys like the second coming of Jerry Lee Lewis. The last chord crashed. A beat stunned silence. The room erupted, the sound of a coronation. Hilburn left the club electrified, certain of what he'd witnessed, but grappling at how to frame it. He was a veteran journalist, 30 years old, but new to the pop music beat. And for what he had just seen, the old rules didn't apply. He decided to forget the rules. He would write it like he was calling a friend to tell them about the show. His lead would be a single word: rejoice. In the wake of the Beatles' breakup, George Harrison was a man unburdened. For the first time, he had freedom and the studio time to empty a decade's worth of notebooks. Just weeks after the breakup went public, spring of 1970, George went to work on All Things Must Pass. Released in the fall, it was a sprawling, spiritual epic, a double album with a bonus third disc filled with studio jams. To the surprise of many at the time, it was a commercial smash and critically acclaimed as well. Still just 26 years of age, George Harrison stepped out as an artistic force equal to his former bandmates. Flush with success and feeling a little more vindicated by it, George was on a trip to Los Angeles in June 1971 when the call came. It was his friend and spiritual mentor, the sitar master Ravi Shankar. The news was grim. A humanitarian crisis was underway in newly formed Bangladesh, born of a devastating cyclone and a man-made genocide. Shankar's request was simple and impossible. He needed George to use his name, to use his power, to do something. And here we find our third path. As Elton John was building his own myth and John Lennon was trying to shed his, George Harrison set out to do something else entirely. He would take all the power, all the fame, all the mythology that came with being an ex-Beatle, and try to give it away. Harrison spent the month of July working the phones. There was no playbook for a charity event on this scale because no one had ever attempted one. Harrison secured commitments from Ringo Starr and Leon Russell. He recruited members Badfinger and Delaney and Bonnie, even coaxed a fragile Eric Clapton out of seclusion. One big question remained. Bob Dylan, ever enigmatic, was still a soft yes. On August 1st, 1971, 2 shows at Madison Square Garden, a matinee and an evening performance. Dylan showed up after all and delivered fiery inspired sets. The intent was noble, the execution a triumph. But the aftermath was a bureaucratic nightmare. Millions raised by the concert, album, and film were held up by tax agencies in multiple countries. It was a knot Harrison would spend a decade trying to untangle. The true victory wasn't financial, it was informational. As Ravi Shankar later said, in one day, the whole world knew the name Bangladesh. So it was messy, complicated, but George Harrison took the brightest spotlight in the world and pointed it away from himself, proving that fame could be a tool and not just a reward. For one of his oldest friends, however, that spotlight wasn't a tool to be deployed. For John Lennon, who was already under surveillance by the Nixon administration for his anti-war activism, it was the harsh, glaring bulb in an interrogation room. He just wanted to smash it and escape. In the summer of 1971, George Harrison's slide guitar found its way onto another recording, not on a global stage, but in the private studio of an old friend. George Harrison made the drive to Tittenhurst Park and contributed guitar parts on 5 tracks for John Lennon's new album, Imagine. Out of gratitude, John agreed to return the favor. He would perform at George's upcoming benefit concert for Bangladesh. But when John requested a performance slot for Yoko Ono, George demurred. From Harrison's perspective, it was a matter of professional triage. The undertaking was already a logistical nightmare, but John took it as a personal insult, and he withdrew from the concert. Their paths, which had briefly converged, now fractured apart. George Harrison found a way to use his fame to engage the world. John Lennon, exhausted by the political fight, was now looking for a way to simply live in it. Released in the fall of 1971, the Imagine album was a melodic farewell to John's old life in England, a declaration of independence from the myth that had built him and then nearly broken him. "You may say I'm a dreamer," John sings in that magnificent title track. It's a line that somehow combines resignation and defiant hope, reflecting his own inner struggle out into the world. That summer, John and Yoko left England for good. Their destination was New York City, the same mythic America that Elton John saw as the ultimate stage. But Lennon wasn't looking for a spotlight. He was looking for a place to get lost in the crowd. A place where, for the first time in a decade, he could just be.
Boston at last, and the plane's touching down. Our hostess is handing the hot towels around. From a terminal gate to a black limousine, it's a 10-minute ride to the Holiday Inn.
If the Troubadour was the launch pad, then the months that followed were liftoff. Over the next 2 years and change, the Rocket Man attained high orbit. Life became a blur of airport terminals, the back seats of limousines, and another Holiday Inn. Morning radio interviews, afternoon sound checks, and nightly performances, back on a plane to do it again. The pace was hot, but the trajectory was anything but smooth. The chart performance of his latest album, Madman Across the Water, was solid, not spectacular. Elton was working at the pace of a superstar, but the sales charts hadn't fully ratified the promotion. It wasn't just failing to hit number 1, hardly a failure, but that's how Elton saw it. It was closer to home. Back in England, the music press was openly skeptical, bordering on hostile. Elton was an avid reader of the rock press. He took in everything. Many of the Brit music writers seemed to think Elton's fascination with American roots music was insincere, a crass commercial calculation. Well, that one stung. Inside Trident Studios, the sessions for Madman Across the Water followed the established protocol. A crew of elite session musicians laid down the core tracks. The record company didn't trust Elton's road band with that job. Now, once they were done, Arranger Paul Buckmaster, the architect of the grand orchestral sound, would get to work. The air in the studio was tight, the work painstaking. Then, a careless elbow. A bottle of ink tipped, spilling a wave of black across the sole copy of an orchestral score. A small, mundane accident. Dozens of musicians were setting up in the big room, but their score was now a useless black mess. The session ground to a halt. Elton exploded. Every simmering frustration, the bad reviews, the stagnant chart positions, the endless grinding work, all of it fed his white-hot rage. In later years, Elton would become notorious for catty, bitchy remarks in the press and for the occasional meltdown. But here at Triton, in the summer of 1971, this was a side of Elton John few had seen before. Paul Buckmaster was equally furious. It was a bloody accident, Elton. But professionalism dies hard, so Buckmaster worked all night rewriting the entire score from memory. All that drama for one lost session. It was a long time before Paul Buckmaster would work with Elton John again. Madman Across the Water dropped in November. It was a solid hit in America, number 8 on the album charts. But it failed to crack the top 40 in the UK. The British music press roasted it. One of their favorite critiques? All those goopy strings all over the album. Overcooked, overproduced, way too much. What Elton hated the most about those reviews? Well, he kind of agreed with them. He wanted to make songs with a little mud on the tires. Time to switch things up. First, on January 7, 1972, over the objections of his mother, Reginald Kenneth DeWitt legally became Elton Hercules John. Next step, time to get out of London. 25 miles northwest of Paris, the landscape softens into the rolling countryside of Valdois, Van Gogh country. Here in the village of Hérouville-en-Vexin stands an 18th century stone manor, a place built for retreat. For Elton and his band, it was a sanctuary, a place to live and work 24 hours a day far from the London pressure cooker. 30 rooms, a swimming pool, a private chef. The studio itself, a converted barn, sounded warm, open, and alive. The nickname wasn't inspiration, more of a goof, but it was witty, so it stuck. It would come to define the loose, joyful sound they were about to create here. They called it the Honky Chateau. The band arrived at the chateau in January of 1972 and immediately made the place their own. The rehearsal studio upstairs was ignored. Elton's piano was moved into the grand dining room. New songs were written and rehearsed right there, fueled by the communal energy of the house. Guitarist Davy Johnstone, the newest member of the band, summed up the experience. It was, he said, the most fun I've ever had making a record. One of Elton John's core ambitions was to lead a proper band. In his earliest days as a working musician, he was in a band called Bluesology, backing a singer who went by Long John Baldry. His newly adopted name was a mashup of Baldry's first name and that of sax player Elton Dean. From his perch on the piano bench, Elton had watched John Baldry work, fronting the band, assigning roles, directing the show. He knew right away he wanted to be that guy. Out on the road, he was that guy. But in the studio, the record company and producer Gus Dudgeon had always insisted on the proven formula, elite London session pros. The chart success of Madman in the States gave Elton new leverage, and he used it.
She packed my bags last night, pre-flight. 0 hour, 9 a.m. And I'm gonna be.
The idea had come to Bernie Taupin while driving, the opening lines repeating in his head for hours until he could write them down. The inspiration was a short story from Ray Bradbury's 1951 collection, The Illustrated Man. The Rocket Man treated the life of an astronaut not as a heroic adventure, but as a job. A lonely, repetitive job that separated a man from his family for long stretches. An interplanetary truck driver punching a clock. Bradbury's genius was finding the heartbreak in the routine. His Rocket Man lived in two worlds, but he belonged to neither. When he was on Earth, he longed for space, and when he was in space, he ached for home.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time.
Elton grew up a sports fan. In just a few years, he would buy his favorite boyhood football team, the Watford Hornets, which is why a maxim from the legendary basketball coach John Wooden lands right on the mark.
Be quick, but don't hurry.
They worked fast at the Honky Chateau. They always worked fast, but this time it was not some frantic rush to meet a deadline. It was the measured velocity of a tested unit working in sync. Bassist Dee Murray and drummer Nigel Olsson were already a telepathic rhythm section. Their groove was forged on 100 club stages before the hits came. They knew when to punch hard and when to leave some space and just serve the song. The final piece was Davy Johnstone, a 20-year-old Scotsman, a musical prodigy who joined on the Madman tour. He brought crunchy electric riffs and decorated the songs with mandolin, banjo, and sitar. Perhaps his most critical contribution was his voice. He was the final piece of the band's signature three-part harmonies. Producer Gus Dungeon called Dee, Nigel, and Davy unquestionably the best in-house backing vocalists that anybody's ever had on record. Released in May of 1972, Honky Chateau went straight to number one in America. It would be the first of 6 consecutive number ones for Elton. Only the Beatles had pulled that off before he came along.
Kill myself. Suicide. One scandal if I die. Suicide. Headline news. On the state of teenage.
The snotty reviews from the British music press about Madman Across the Water had stung Elton, even if he somewhat agreed with them. Honky Chateau was his rebuttal. The critical verdict came from a familiar source, Robert Hilburn, the same writer who had chronicled Elton's Troubadour Coronation. Writing in the LA Times on July 2, 1972, Hilburn placed Honky Chateau in a 2-album race for the Record of the Year, here at the halfway point. The other contender, David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust. Hilburn's findings ratified the band's own experience in the French countryside. He identified the new, lighter, looser Elton John sound. The lush orchestrations of Mad Men was replaced by a tough, lean rock and roll sound. New Orleans funk, mellow contemplative ballads, rowdy up-tempo rock and roll. They were pulling from multiple strains of Americana, blending them into a tasty gumbo, similar to the recipe their heroes, the band, had perfected. Hilburn also noted the humor and irony in Bernie's lyrics, and called out the zany tap dance solo on I Think I'm Gonna Kill Myself. Number 1 on the U.S. album charts. 2 top 10 singles. Summer Tour of America was booked. Shows were routinely selling out within hours. The Rocket Man had attained high orbit.
An overnight phenomenon like there's never been. A motivated supersonic king of the same. I'll be a teenage idol. Just give me a break. I'm gonna be
8 months later, in January 1973, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player arrived. It spun off 2 massive but stylistically opposite hit singles, Crocodile Rock, a lightweight piece of nostalgia and Elton John's first number 1, and Daniel, a melancholy ballad about a war veteran. Side 2 featured the great deep cut, I'm Going to Be a Teenage Idol, a direct nod to the glam rock scene and Elton's friend T-Rex frontman Mark Bolan. Commercially, Don't Shoot Me was another monster, Elton John's first transatlantic number one. It was not a definitive artistic statement, more the sound of an artist reinforcing his commercial standing. The definitive statement was what came next. First, though, let's hear from some sponsors real quick, and then we'll look in on some ex-Beatles. At first, Ringo Starr was, by his own admission, absolutely lost. George had a decade's worth of songs, Paul had his new band, John had Yoko, along with no small amount of righteous fury. Ringo had his drums and his friends. That proved to be enough. While his former bandmates were drawing battle lines, Ringo became rock and roll Switzerland, studiously neutral, the amiable center of a fractured universe, the one man who could still get everyone in the same room. Not at the same time, maybe, but close enough. Released in the fall of 1973, the album was simply titled Ringo. Strictly speaking, it was his third solo release, but it was the first to get any real traction. Its guest list was a diplomatic coup, the first and only time all four ex-Beatles appeared on the same record. John Lennon contributed I'm the Greatest, a winking piece of self-mythology perfectly suited for his old mate. Paul McCartney delivered the heartbreak ballad 6 O'Clock. George Harrison, Ringo's most reliable collaborator, co-wrote the album's biggest hit, Photograph. Songs like Back Off Boogaloo and the No-No song were just a bit of radio-friendly fun, but It Don't Come Easy had the weight and the songcraft to stand alongside any of the Beatles' late-period work. And it opens with a George Harrison signature, that arpeggiated riff played through Leslie's speakers. The Ringo album was a victory for the power of friendship. Ringo stepped out from behind the kit, and the world loved seeing it. Strong effort from a beloved artist, but it wasn't the best album an ex-Beatle would release that year. For Paul McCartney, the first few years after the breakup were a paradox. He had hit singles like the brilliant, whimsical Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey. Hi 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 was an energetic, if unremarkable, rocker off the second Wings album, Red Rose Speedway. In early '73, he was commissioned to write a James Bond theme, and Live and Let Die was a worldwide smash. It was the biggest Bond theme song yet, and it reunited Paul with George Martin. But the albums themselves, the critical consensus was brutal. Domesticated, unfocused, worst of all, forgettable, nothing special. The work of an artist in retreat. Fueling the negativity was a widespread perception that Paul was the villain of the Beatles' breakup saga. Not really a fair assessment, but it was out there just the same. By the fall of 1973, Paul McCartney was now 5 albums into his solo career, 3 of those with his new band Wings. The music press had mostly written him off as a lightweight, the ex-Beatle least likely to succeed. Band on the Run was the album that changed the narrative. A reoccurring creative obsession of Paul McCartney is the idea of escaping, usually by going incognito. The Sgt. Pepper alter ego was his concept. On the road with the Beatles, he donned disguises and tried to blend in with the tourists. The plan to record the new album in Lagos, Nigeria, was yet another escape attempt. This particular attempt came perilously close to failing. And just before the trip, 2 members of Wings abruptly quit. In Lagos, Paul and Linda were robbed at knife point, the thieves stealing their demo tapes. The studio was primitive, the weather oppressively hot, and the country was racked with political chaos. In the midst of that, McCartney's fixation with escape themes fused with one of his unique musical gifts. Like he did with the closeout of the Abbey Road album, and a year later with Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey, Paul built an idea into a multi-part musical suite. The album was critically acclaimed and a commercial monster. Paul took his personal fascination with going incognito, fused it with his most ambitious musical instincts, and built a new myth. The ex-Beatle, voted least likely to succeed, ended up snatching the crown.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid.
John and Yoko had definitely hit a rough patch. They needed to separate. That was the one thing they seemed able to agree on. Always the pragmatist, Yoko asked their assistant, May Pang, to act as John's companion and caretaker. In the fall of 1973, John relocated to Los Angeles, with May tagging along and singer-songwriter Harry Nilsson as his chief accomplice. The next 18 months or so were the period John called his lost weekend. The first half of 1974 found John Lennon down deep in a Hollywood haze of booze and cocaine, out till dawn, then hiding from the daylight, watching TV, getting even more wrecked. Harry Nilsson pinpointed the problem. Years later in an interview, Harry noted that John liked to drink, but he wasn't a very good drinker. This led to several public humiliations, like the incident we detailed in the last main episode. That night, a packed house at the Troubadour saw John Lennon getting kicked to the curb like just another drunken asshole. Through the chaos, John tried to work. He attempted an album of rock and roll oldies, hiring the notoriously volatile Phil Spector to produce. Those sessions at A&M Studios quickly and predictably descended into madness. Spector would show up for sessions in a surgeon's outfit or a karate uniform, jabbering nonsense while he huffed truly alarming amounts of cocaine. Then one night, he brandished a pistol in the studio and fired it into the ceiling just inches from Lennon's head. "Phil, if you're gonna kill me, then kill me," John screamed. "But don't fuck with my ears. I need 'em." Chagrined, at least for the moment, Spector weaved out of the studio, but not before grabbing the master tapes and taking them with him. John would talk to Yoko on the phone daily, sometimes for hours. That invisible thread kept him more or less tethered to reality. The move back to New York that summer of 1974 was a course correction. Leaving Los Angeles probably saved John's life. He went to work on Walls and Bridges, the album that would lead to his wager with Elton John, and in a final act of house cleaning, he finished the rock and roll album, closing a chapter that had been interrupted by Phil Spector's unhinged gunplay. Released in February 1975, Rock and Roll would be John Lennon's last album of new material for 5 years. Around that same time, early 1975, John learned that Yoko was pregnant. He moved back into their apartment in the Dakota. In solidarity, he quit smoking, quit drinking and drugging, and went on a macrobiotic diet. Yoko had a history of difficult pregnancies, so she was on strict bed rest for the duration. "We just waited around at home for 9 months, John recalled in a 1980 Rolling Stone interview.
Close your eyes, have no fear.
On John's 35th birthday, October 9th, 1975, Sean Ono Lennon was born. Sean's godfather was Elton John. A moment of quiet daylight at John and Yoko's Dakota apartment in the fall of 1975. To fully understand that moment, let's go back to 1973 and the Rocket Man's trajectory, right after some words from our friends. As the year began, Elton wanted to change things up, again. Bernie and the band were enthusiastically on board. The Honky Chateau had served them well, 2 number-1 albums and 4 top 10 singles in just over 9 months. But the superstar with the feather boas and the rhinestone-studded glasses was still not that far removed from that shy, pudgy kid browsing London record stores. His record collector's ear had been caught by the revolutionary new sounds coming out of Jamaica, the emerging pulse of reggae. Elton fancied the idea of working in Kingston, of soaking up those tasty rhythms at the source.
When she gets up in the morning, it's enough to wake the day. Oh, she turning on the radio and dancing on my head. There's nobody living in the sun, playing guitar.
Gus Dungeon had scouted the location, Dynamic Sounds in Kingston, and the word was positive. The Rolling Stones had recorded Goat's Head Soup there just a few weeks earlier. It didn't work out. At all. Kingston was noisy, hot, and at least to Elton, menacing. The studio was a single building on a gravel lot, ringed by a barbed wire fence and patrolled by scary-looking dudes with submachine guns. The guys in the band headed to the Ocho Rios resort on the north side of the island and spent a week lazing in the sun and smoking lots of ganja. Oh, they all loved Jamaica. Not Elton. He was afraid to leave his Kingston hotel. He had a Fender Rhodes piano brought to his room. Bernie dropped off the lyrics to 21 new songs. Elton composed them right then and there over the next 3 days. The Kingston sessions never got off the ground. The mission was scrubbed. The next stop? Back to the Honky Chateau.
Come on, Jamaica, in Jamaica all day, Jamaica all day. Dancing with your darling, don't you make a girl come that way. Come on, Jamaica.
The chateau was undergoing renovations and unavailable till May. The good news, they had enough songs for a double album this time. Plus, they had already worked out the lead single, and it was a scorcher. It opened with a ferocious guitar riff from Davy Johnstone, loud and nasty, more like a heavy cut from The Who or The Stones than the pop sing-alongs or the wistful piano-led Americana that Elton's vast audience had come to expect. Elton relished the idea of a song that moved him off that rep as the piano man who cranked out safe, middle-of-the-road pop hits. So it was first up when they finally got back to the chateau. They played it live in the studio, but Elton didn't sit at the piano. He dubbed that in later. He stood behind the mic, Daltrey or Jagger style, and pushed the band hard like a frontman should. Nigel Olsson recalls him stomping around the live room, waving his arms and screaming, "Come on, you bastards!" In the fall of 1973 and well into 1974, there was no escaping Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. It attained a level of cultural saturation not seen since the Summer of Sgt. Pepper, a phenomenon we excavated back in episode 14 of Rock and Roll Archaeology. The album art was a welcoming gateway, a cartoon Elton in ruby rhinestone bedazzled platforms stepping into a movie poster slapped on a brick wall. A glittering fantasy world where the mythical land of Oz beckons in the distance. Tear off the plastic, open up the gatefold, and you have 17 pieces of original art accompanying the lyrics to each song. It was a total immersive experience before you even dropped the needle. The commercial verdict was returned quickly. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road entered the U.S. charts at number 17. 4 weeks later, it sat firmly at number 1, where it did not budge for months. At the time, it was the most expensive double album ever, mainly because of its extravagant packaging, but that didn't slow it down at all. It ended up being the biggest selling album in 1974, a 17-song epic that spun off a string of era-defining hits. But the most interesting, and certainly the most ironic, story about Yellow Brick Road was the one, and possibly the only, time the Rocket Man's commercial instincts were just dead wrong. And we'll backtrack just a little. Elton wanted to follow up his first #1 single, Crocodile Rock, with Daniel, but the record company balked. Lovely song, but too slow and too sad for a hit single, Dick James told him. They would agree to it only if Elton put it out without any marketing budget. If it caught on, then they'd put up some money to promote it. Elton made a bet on himself, and it paid off. Daniel hit #2 on the U.S. singles charts and #4 in the U.K. Point being, Elton was a student of the industry, and his commercial instincts were razor sharp. Which is why this next piece of the story is weird and it's wonderful. WJLB Detroit was an R&B station catering to a predominantly black audience. Donnie Simpson hosted the Graveyard Shift, the newest hire at the station, just 20 at the time, but he'd been spinning records for 5 years already. There was this one track that had seized his ear. It was a weird one, but in a good way, a glam rock anthem filtered through an R&B lens. Benny and the Jets. He wanted to give it regular spins, but Donnie's boss, Jay Butler, was hesitant. An Elton John track on an R&B station? I don't know, man. Next day, Butler checked in with some managers at black record stores around Detroit. Oh yeah, the new Elton is a hot seller. People are asking for it. Specifically, they're asking for Benny and the Jets. Overnight, Benny became the station's most requested song. Jay Butler called Elton's promotion man, Pat Piepolo, with the surprising news. Then one more phone call. This one across the border. In episode 23 of Rock and Roll Archaeology, Radio, we talked about the border blasters, these high-output AM stations operating just over the border and just outside the conventional wisdom of commercial radio. CKLW, the Big 8 out of Windsor, Ontario, was a Canadian border blaster, a 50,000-watt powerhouse whose signal blanketed a dozen U.S. states. Across the upper Midwest, the Big 8 was known for mixing it up on the night shift, playing black R&B hits right alongside white rock and roll. Rosalie Trombley, CKLW's program director, was known as the girl with the golden ear. Jay Butler's call from Detroit confirmed her instincts about Benny and the Jets. She put in her own call to Elton's promotion man, Pat Piepolo. Rosalie got right to the point. Release it as the next single. Guaranteed. Crossover hit. Piepolo went to the label with what he'd learned, but no one there was convinced. Candle in the Wind was already planned as the next single. Elton was the biggest skeptic of all. He challenged Piepolo. Are you prepared to put your career on the line? Pat Piepolo swallowed hard and committed. You'll be an R&B artist as well as a pop artist. Rush released on February 4th, 1974, Benny and the Jets hit #1 on the pop charts and made it to number 15 on the Billboard R&B charts. For a record-collecting kid from West London who had long adored black music, this was a profound validation, an embrace from the artists and the audience he revered the most. Bernie Taupin also understood the broader significance of the moment. As he put it,
Benny and the Jets
wasn't what was going on radio-wise in general. We set a trend. We broke the mold. The improbable journey of Bending the Jets shattered old notions about genre, busted barriers, and pushed Elton into a new, even higher orbit. The Bitch's Back dropped in the summer of '74, and it was Elton's toughest sounding, hardest rocking single yet. Like Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, it opened with another deadly riff from Davy Johnstone. The tagline came from Bernie's wife, Maxine, and it was a dark private joke. Whenever Elton would throw one of his now signature tantrums, she'd just sigh, "Oh, here we go, the bitch is back." Bernie took that tagline and crafted a bitchy retort from Elton to the music press. "I entertain by picking brains, sell my soul by dropping names," goes a memorable line in the second verse. Same song a couple of lines later, full of nasty habits when the bitch gets back. It was during the Caribou Sessions, named after the Caribou Ranch studio high in the Colorado mountains, that Elton started using cocaine. The Bitch's Back was yet another smash, and a staple of Elton's live shows for decades to come. But overall, the Caribou album was, in Elton's own words, a dud. Producer Gus Dungeon thought it was crap and said so loudly and publicly. But Elton and Bernie were flush with success and full of the unearned confidence that comes with cocaine use. They arrogantly figured anything they did at this point would be a hit. Well, they weren't wrong. Caribou would end up being Elton John's fourth straight #1 album. Recording wrapped in January of '74, Caribou took 8 days, lightning fast even by Elton John standards. They headed out on tour, Asia and Australia, after that onto Europe in the spring, or so they thought.
I can't lie. No more of your darkness. All my pictures seem to fade to black and white.
Australia and New Zealand had been difficult for Elton and the boys the first time through, back in '71. Platinum success didn't really change that 3 years later. Despite the welcome good news from America about Bending the Jets, it seemed like the land down under held some kind of curse. Travel and accommodation problems, and the venue in New Zealand was wholly unsuitable. Elton had a tendency to get salty from the stage with concert security whenever he thought they were getting too physical with the fans. There were several ugly incidents with that. Worst of all, Elton's road manager, John Reed, decided to punch a female reporter. Then he smacked another reporter who had the temerity to ask about the first incident. On top of substantial monetary damages, a New Zealand judge threw Reed in the slammer for 28 days. They had to finish out the tour without a manager. Back in America, Elton was wiped. Booze, cocaine, the relentless touring and recording schedule had him on the brink. He was overweight and despondent about that. The infamous bitch's back tantrums were now coming almost daily. The spring tour of Europe was canceled, and for the first time in his professional life, Elton John took an extended break.
Don't let the sun go down on me. Although I search myself, it's always someone else I see. I just allow a fragment of your life.
Elton booked a month at a tennis resort in Arizona. He hit the courts daily, stopped drinking and drugging, ate right, and slept every night. He dropped 28 pounds and was tan and fit when he got back to England in May. For some time now, Elton and Bernie had talked about doing a set of autobiographical songs about their early days as novice songwriters in London. Elton was delighted to find that Bernie had used the downtime to write an entire album, a set of chronologically ordered songs starring a couple of new alter egos, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy. Elton booked time at Caribou Ranch starting in early August. This time, they would take a whole leisurely month to record the new song cycle. He took an ocean liner, the SS France, back to New York, a 5-day voyage. In the lavish ballroom named after the French romantic composer Claude Debussy, there was a Steinway Grand. Oh, perfect. Every day, at exactly noon, Elton would sit down for 2 hours with a sheaf of Bernie's lyrics and compose. From there, he would play squash or just relax on the deck. Also on board, John Lennon's first wife, Cynthia, and Julian Lennon, now a gangly, energetic 11-year-old, headed to New York to visit his dad. Elton dined with them every night. About halfway through the trip, a telegram arrived. Caribou had just been certified platinum, 1 million units sold. By the time they were pierside in New York Harbor, the follow-up, Captain Fantastic, was completely written. John Lennon was back in New York City by now, too. Still in his lost weekend, still separated from Yoko, staying in a suite at the Pierre Hotel. But now it was just a 10-minute walk through Central Park to the Dakota.
Once they were in the same city, I knew it wouldn't be long.
Elton said years later in an interview. When Elton stopped by the Pierre to visit his friend in New York, all that Arizona clean living went quickly by the wayside. One infamous story has them hiding in the bathroom, sweaty and paranoid, while the cops banged on the door at the suite. It wasn't the cops. It was Andy Warhol stopping by unannounced for a late-night visit. Elton was delighted to help out with Lennon's new album, but Caribou Ranch and Captain Fantastic waited. In mid-August, John Lennon arrived at Caribou to guest on Elton's cover of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Now it was Lennon's turn to be a little nervous. He forgot the chords and needed Davy Johnstone to gently remind him how to play his own song. John stayed on for a few more days, watching the guys work, riding horses, and venturing into town one afternoon for some shopping. One can only imagine how the staff at the Nederland General Store reacted to John Lennon sauntering in to buy a 10-gallon cowboy hat. Caribou was still selling big. Hell, Yellow Brick Road was still on the charts. A 10-song greatest hits album was slated for a late fall release. That was sure to be another multi-platinum smash. So even with Captain Fantastic recorded and ready to go, there was no rush. They would hold it until the spring of 1975. To further satiate Elton's vast army of hungry fans, they hit the road, and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was released as a holiday single. John Lennon was credited on the sleeve as Dr. Winston O'Boogie on rhythm guitar. On November 16, 1974, while Elton and the boys were rampaging across America on yet another sold-out arena tour, this blurb was on the cover of Record World magazine.
With his Walls and Bridges album and Whatever Gets You Through the Night single bulleting into the top spot on the respective charts, John Lennon's musical mastery has received the added impetus of a massive marketing push from Capitol Records. See story on page 20.
Elton John called up Dr. Winston O'Boogie to collect on their bet. To get a feel for things, John caught the Boston show and then winged it back to New York on the Starship, the luxury tour plane favored by Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Alice Cooper, and others. Now, the Starship logged more miles, a lot more, with Elton John than any other act. From 1973 to 1976, the converted Boeing 720 ferried the boys in rock star style to 134 U.S. shows, including this one, November 28th, 1974, Madison Square Garden, New York City.
Seeing it's Thanksgiving, we thought we'd make tonight a little bit of a joyous occasion by inviting someone up with us onto stage. And I'm sure he will be no stranger to anybody in the audience when I say it's our great privilege and your great privilege to see and hear Mr. John Lennon.
Waiting in the wings, John Lennon was hesitant. First, he tried to convince Bernie Taupin to come out with him. Then he squared his shoulders like a man stoically accepting his fate and stepped out onto the stage. 3 songs, 14 minutes of rapture for 19,000 fans. After a lengthy ovation, Elton counted off and they rattled through an absurdly fast, up-tempo version of Whatever Gets You Through the Night. Then they traded verses on Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Lennon stepped to the mic and introduced their final song.
I'd like to thank Elton and the boys for having me on tonight. We tried to think of a number to finish off with so that I could get out of here and be sick. And we thought we'd do a number of an old estranged fiancé of mine called Paul. This is one I never sang. It's an old Beatle number, and we just about know it.
Yoko was at the garden that night, another face in the crowd. She thought her husband looked lonely up there. Yoko also registered how moved the people around her were by what they had just seen. Afterwards, she met John backstage and shared what she had observed. John Lennon would later say this was the precise moment he realized it. He needed to come home. John Lennon finally made it back from his lost weekend. Meanwhile, Elton John got on board the Starship and took off to another city. The calendar flipped to 1975. When May arrived, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy hit record stores at last. All the chaos, the pressure, the tantrums, the relentless grinding work of the last 5 years had created something wholly unexpected, something wonderful.
Captain Fantastic, raised and regimented, hardly a hero, just someone his mother might know.
Captain Fantastic was the first album in history to enter the Billboard charts at number 1. Not even the Beatles had ever managed to do that. But lofty chart positions and platinum sales, while certainly a welcome validation, were hardly the point this time. This wasn't another glossy, widescreen blockbuster. Captain Fantastic was a handmade, intensely personal document, an album that looked back, not with nostalgia, but with clarity and depth of feeling, to the dirt and the dreams of the very beginning. Bernie had delivered the lyrics in chronological order, and Elton composed them the same way. The result is an album that unfolds like a novel. The story of 2 outsiders who found in each other the one thing they were both missing. Each song is a chapter detailing their early struggles in late 60s London, the desperation of Meal Ticket, the disillusionment of Bitter Fingers. The story reaches its dramatic climax with the album's 6.5-minute centerpiece, Someone Saved My Life Tonight. It's a direct, harrowing account of Elton's own suicide attempt and how his friend, Long John Baldry, Sugar Bear, talked him out of a disastrous marriage and literally saved him. When they tracked it at Caribou, Gus Dungeon pushed Elton through repeated vocal takes. Davy Johnston could see the emotional toll it was taking and begged Dungeon to relent, to give Elton a break. When he heard the playback, Elton started weeping and had to leave the control room to pull himself together. Just the one-hit single this time, Someone Saved My Life Tonight. But Captain Fantastic wasn't built for the radio. It was built for the turntable. It demands to be heard straight through in one sitting. It was, and still is, the purest artistic statement of Elton John's long career.
Someone save my life. Someone save my life tonight. Someone save my life. Someone save my life tonight. Someone save my life.
Elton resisted moving up to stadiums for as long as he could. Instead, they would do multiple arena shows in the same city. 3 nights in New York and Chicago, 4 sold-out nights at the Forum in Los Angeles, 2 in Seattle, and so on. Rather than barnstorming from city to city, they went region to region, setting up a base camp and then flying in on the Starship each night for the show. For the Captain Fantastic tour, he let Dee Murray and Nigel Olsson go, fired them over the phone, which caused no small amount of lingering resentment. For a few years there, Nigel and Elton were not on speaking terms. Davy Johnston stayed on as guitarist/musical director. Davy assembled a wrecking crew that could demolish a stadium in a matter of hours. That cabaret trio that played the Troubadour had evolved into a 13-piece powerhouse. 2 percussionists, an additional keyboardist, a horn section, backup singers, the works.
We've thrown in the towel too many times. Out for the count when we're down. Captain from traffic down. Brown dirt cowboy from there. And all the word to your town.
The Imperial Phase. Neil Tennant of the Pet Shop Boys came up with that turn of phrase, and rock writers have been using it ever since. It's the sweet spot in a musical career where artistic and commercial achievement are at a simultaneous peak. Elton John had the most imperial of imperial phases that anyone has ever seen. Sales and chart positions that rivaled the Beatles. But Elton's massive tours, hundreds of arena and stadium shows, well, that was something the Beatles never touched, never even came close. In the latter half of the 70s, Paul McCartney and Wings did a couple of tours with the kind of impact that Elton's tours had, but Elton did it again and again, every single year, for 5 straight years. The Imperial Phase required an imperial stage. They closed out the Summer Stadium Tour with 2 nights at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles, October 25th and 26th, 1975, the largest baseball stadium in America, 5 towering decks, capacity 55,000 souls. The last concert there was in 1966, one of the final shows of the Beatles' final U.S. tour. Elton's powerhouse band rolled through a powerhouse set, 31 songs, basically 2 full sets with an intermission, 3.5 hours. The hits, the deep cuts, old chestnuts, and new material from Captain Fantastic. Elton famously came out for the second half of each show dressed in a sequined Dodger uniform, bat in hand. And then he put one in the cheap seats and started his home run trot in front of 55,000 crazed fans. The Return of the King, 5 years almost to the month after his American coronation at the Troubadour.
Those are the gigs you live for.
Elton recalled in his 2019 memoir.
It was a pinnacle.
L.A. embraced us before anyone, Bernie Taupin remembered.
It was here that we flourished and found our sweet spot, so we're indebted.
Thank you, Los Angeles. Thank you, the Dodgers.
There's an ancient Chinese curse, sometimes mistaken for a blessing. May you get everything you wish for. At the close of 1975, John Lennon and Elton John were 2 of the few people on Earth who have fully experienced the terrible weight of that curse. Both men got exactly what they wanted.
What am I gonna do to make you love me? What am I gonna do to make you care? What do I do when lightning strikes me?
For Elton John, the wish was for the global spotlight, and he got it. The #1 albums, the sold-out stadiums, the private jet, the absolute summit. And then came the bill. The pressure to maintain that orbit was unrelenting. The loyal bandmates who had been with him from the beginning were fired. The cocaine, once a party favor, was now a necessity. The joy was replaced by the grind. Adding to the immense pressure was a secret, something only his family and closest friends knew. Elton John was a closeted gay man in an era when that truth could end a career. Just 2 days before the triumphant Dodger Stadium gig, he downed a bottle of Valium and jumped into the pool in front of dozens of horrified party guests. They called a private doctor to pump his stomach and keep the desperate cry for help out of the press. He had wished for the spotlight, worked incredibly hard for it. Now he was trapped in it.
People say I'm crazy, doing what I'm doing.
John Lennon's wish was for the opposite, the quiet daylight of a normal life, and he got it. He escaped the machine. He went to court on his immigration status, and in 1976, on Sean's first birthday, he won his case. From there, he went back home to the Dakota. He baked bread, read the newspaper over morning tea, then walked his toddler son down to the pond in Central Park, where they would feed the ducks. For 5 years, he was a self-described house husband and a doting father, watching the wheels go round and round with the detached amusement of one no longer in the game. He wished for peace, struggled for it, and finally found it. The curse for John Lennon was not in the wish, nor was it in the struggle to fulfill that wish. It was that the world would not let him keep that wish for long. I'm Christian Swain, and this has been Rock and Roll Archaeology on Pantheon Media. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next month with a special episode. All right, keep up the rockin'.
I really love to watch them roll. No longer riding on the merry-go-round. I just had to let it go. People asking questions.
Rock and Roll Archaeology is hosted and produced by Christian Swain. Story by Christian Swain and Richard Evans. Written by Richard Evans. Sound design and incidental music by Jerry Danielsen. If you want to reach us, rockandrollarchaeology.com has links to all of our socials. If you'd like an ad-free version, visit our Patreon page. Copyright 2025, all rights reserved. This presentation is education and commentary, consistent with the fair use provisions of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act.